This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Welcome, Talk Catholic, the website.com, your host, Tim Kilcoyne. No agendas here, just the straight and narrow, through Mary to Jesus, the Catholic faith proclaimed and preserved. Hope to see you here every week. TalkCatholic.com with Tim Kilcoyne as we approach Christmas and get those lights up early, but not too early because we want them up late. Okay, we want them up early and late, but not as early as our secular stores have the music playing and the ornaments up. Early November now used to be traditionally at Thanksgiving. I said to a retail cashier just the other day, I'm going to put you in charge of going up the ladder to the hierarchy and telling them we do not want Christmas shut down on December 26th. And she was with me, but we've been doing this for so long because of the money to be made that right after Halloween, Christmas begins. It's getting earlier and earlier, isn't it? Well, why don't you remind the retailers that Christmas starts on December 25th? Yes, Advent is a beautiful time in preparation, but the season begins on the day of our Lord's birthday. And it extends, as I've said in many former shows, really all the way through February 2nd, Feast of the Lights, Candle Mass, which is the end of the celebration of Christ's childhood. Well, that's the old liturgical calendar. Mother Angelica absolutely adopted, and I do too, because I feel that there's nothing wrong with keeping the Christ child in full view, front and center, for as long as you can until we begin to go towards Lent. And who exactly wants to shut down Christmas as early as possible? I don't think we should be listening to that person very long. So I think it's a very beautiful celebration of the Christ child. And the retailers might find that they'll make more money if they keep Christmas going, huh? So in any event, we will get back to our book review, Mother Angelica's Answers, Not Promises, in the second half of the show. I'd like to add just a few more questions from the book Christus, Vincit with Bishop Athanasius Schneider and Diane Montagna, interviewer. And I also want to call your attention to a couple of videos. One in particular, it was called Trump's 10-Point Plan, but it's at 26 minutes to 29:06 to be exact, where Taylor Marshall is drawing parallels between the deep state and the deep church by drawing attention to the word salad sermons that we have been subjected to for so long, by specifically bureaucrats behind the scenes who are not called to preach themselves. Go to that and check it out, and I think you will remember the sermon that you're hearing over and over and over again. And one of the characteristics of the deep church, and remember, the deep church is the counterfeit church, the one prophesied, referred to by Archbishop Fulton Sheen years ago, that the devil, his last maneuver, is to try to set up a Catholic, quote-unquote, church that looks like the church, has all the rubrics in some regard of the church, but isn't the church at all. And the argument is being waged by Bishop Strickland from Tyler, Texas, in another good internet video on the show Return to Tradition with Anthony Stein. It's entitled Bishop Strickland Warns the Bishops to Rebuke, where he's talking about the synod being really the cultivation of that counterfeit church. But we'll speak to that in just a second. Regarding my experience, well, so often being in Catholic religious ed and taking my own risks in speaking truth to evil weekly and hitting on the 10 Commandments and the various offshoots from there, I just don't buy it that the average priest doesn't have the absolute direct responsibility of speaking to the world in which we live from the pulpit, which requires a little bit of articulation of Catholic Church teaching on like a whole host of issues that you'll find in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. If you ever want to see exactly what I'm talking about, go to Father Chris Allaire out at the Marians out in Stockbridge at any given weekday Mass that he might be saying, as I was taking in a Mass today by Father Chris, where he was giving a whole expose on the Church's teachings through the ages relative to slavery and spelling out what Pope Leo XIII had to say and Pope Eugene IV had to say and Pope Paul III had to say. And yes, popes from yesteryear need to be listened to and studied. They're in continuity with the unchanging deposit of the Catholic faith. Well, in any event, I'm sitting there in the pew and kind of waiting and waiting and waiting for the meat and potatoes. And as usual, it just went round and round in kind of, well, an old book called Psychobabble pretty much spells it out, where you can just mix a lot of syllables and say absolutely nothing after 15 minutes. So this is post-election. And I went up to the priest afterwards and I said, Father, don't be afraid to at least pray for the president's success, okay? Now, that's not like an absolute staunch endorsement of a political party or Trump himself. I'm just saying that it's important to pray for the success of the president of the United States, whoever it is. And he immediately fired back, well, not everything good took place. And I said, no, but it would have been the alternative would have been an absolute complete disaster, and the church would have gone into the catacombs for sure. And then he said, well, we'll just have to pray. And then I said, and talk. And then he said, that's not what the gospel is for. Oh, really? That's what I'm doing every Saturday. And then I said, and I looked at him with a piercing stare, and I said, Father, and I said it with only goodwill charity in my voice, I completely disagree with you. And he looked down, and I walked away. If it was a Monday morning, I would have got in my car to the chancery to find out exactly who's giving the orders to silence our priests, okay? I thank the Lord for giving me the gift of temperance in the moment. That's all I can say. But this is the absolute cornerstone of what will be a counterfeit church, if not already. If we think that our moral leaders in Christ, the priest, the bishop, etc., do not have the responsibility to speak to the issues of the times in which we live. I know I focus on this often, and I have to until I see change. It's my responsibility as a Catholic religious educator faithful to my calling, and it's no different for a priest. And so I'm begging them, buck the system, the establishment that is silencing you. And I got an easy answer. Grab some really good guys in your parish who are married with children and who have had enough of the vanilla, the Pollyanna sermons, as Father William Casey from the Fathers of Mercy would call them. Please, just let's see if you can get 7 guys this Christmas season from your local parish who are married with children, who care about their Catholic faith and, most of all, their children's formation, and get them to sit down with your local pastor and or bishop, especially the bishop, because the bishop, I'm sure, would be delighted to hear from such gentlemen. He hasn't been surrounded by those guys in quite some time, if you know what I'm saying. So this is my long time, call it pet peeve if you like. I like to get it behind me in 2024, because I like to believe that we're living now in a new time where we're not going to worry about the Patriotic Church of China appointing their own bishops coming upon us, nor the Gestapo itself in the political realm. We have an opportunity for a new day in America, and we better get it right. And it starts with the church, not the state. It starts with our faith, not politics. So please, let's do our best to uncover the deep church this Christmas season, and a resolution to do so in 2025. Okay, this is what Christmas is all about. We got to get back to the old in all that was good and true and beautiful. Now, chapter 11 in this book dovetails perfectly with what I've been talking about, counterfeit church. Diane Montagna is talking about the various crises in the church, starting with the Arian crises in the first few centuries where people denied the divinity of Christ, and then the Dark Ages. That's the time period where the papacy was occupied with the wicked and immoral clans of Roman families, Bishop Schneider says. And then the third crisis was the Avignon exile, in a time we had 3 popes, so-called, and that crisis lasted 70 years, and it greatly damaged the church. The Renaissance popes basically paved the way for Luther and all of his criticisms. And so Diane asks, are we now entering a fourth great crisis? And the bishop responds, yes, a tremendous state of confusion over doctrine, morals, and liturgy. The church in our days is infected with the virus of egoistic naturalism and an adaptation to the spirit of an unbelieving world. The clergy in positions of responsibility bend their knees to the world. The following observation, which St. Gregory Nazianzus made regarding the behavior of a great part of the bishops of his time, is definitely applicable to our situation as well. Quote, we serve the times and demands of the masses. We leave our boat to the wind, which happens to blow at the moment, and like chameleons, we know how to give our word many colors. The current crisis is, in my opinion, the deepest and most dangerous one because it expresses itself in a denial of the constant validity of any truth, dogmatic, moral, liturgical, the religious relativism and indifferentism according to which God wills positively the diversity of religions, ultimately entails the denial of the solemn and obligatory divine command of Christ to evangelize people of all nations and religions without exception. This is at the very core of the current crisis in the church. We have already been in the crisis for more than 50 years. Perhaps God will be merciful to us and this crisis will slowly come to an end in 10, 20, or 30 years. God knows and he will intervene in due time as he has already done so often in history. Diane Montagna asks, John Henry Newman once wrote that during the great Arian crisis in the 4th century, it was the faith of the laity rather than the faith of the bishops that saved the church. The bishop responds, I would definitely apply Newman's words about the laity's contribution to preserving the integrity of the faith to the current situation. I remember the following evocative words of St. Hilary of Poitiers, the Athanasius of the West, with which he underlined the fidelity of the lay faithful in light of the betrayal of the faith committed by the majority of the bishops during the Arian crisis. The ears of the faithful people are holier than the lips of the bishop, he said. Along the same lines, I remember a very striking and apt observation of Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen. Who is going to save our church? Not our bishops, not our priests or religious. It's up to you, the people. You have the minds, the eyes, the ears to save the church. Your mission is to see that your priests act like priests, your bishops like bishops, and your religious act like religious. Today, too, the lay faithful, the little ones, by their simple and pure faith, are carrying the church on their shoulders. I often remember the following words of St. Ambrose, which are contained in the breviary. The simple faith of truth is greater than the ambitious lie of eloquence. Oh, can I say that one more time? I love that. The simple faith of truth is greater than the ambitious lie of eloquence. When high-ranking clergy, through an ambitious and false eloquence, become careless in their zeal for Christ and his divine truth, the little ones step into the breach. What St. Bridget of Sweden once heard from the mouth of Christ is surely applicable to the liberal and worldly clergy of our days. He said to her, they would rather speak 100 words for the sake of the world than a single one in my honor. They would rather work 100 times for the sake of their own profit and that of the world than once in my honor. I add, i.e., the word salad sermons that sound eloquent, good, cohesive sentences, subjects and verbs all making logical sense, and yet nothing being said, just to appease the people that their conscience not be rattled, but rather they be encouraged in their sin. That is the net effect of the silence. That's what's going on when you don't give a cross-examination of conscience by way of the sermon. That's at the heart of any good sermon. And it's just not happening, And it's nothing new in the history of the church, is what Bishop Athanasius Schneider is saying right here. Diane asks, how much is the neglect of the first commandment at the heart of the current crisis in the church? The bishop responds, what you say is very apt. Our first duty is to adore God, the Holy Trinity, and the incarnate and Eucharistic God in the sacrament of the Eucharist. To our situation, I would apply the words of the prophet Jeremiah. They have turned to me their back and not their face. Indeed, many of the shepherds of the church have turned their backs on their first duty. They have turned their backs on prayer and the proclamation of Christ. These words of the prophet are in some way a picture of the church today and of the way the new Mass is usually celebrated. They have turned away from the Lord. The apostles said, we will devote ourselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word. Acts chapter 6, verse 4. The apostles said it was not good for them to deal with temporal affairs to the detriment of their primary spiritual duties. So it's pretty impossible not to draw the parallels. Like the election, the people spoke to severe bureaucratic corruption. And the same has to be true in the church. And the good news are websites like Catholic.blog or the Institute of Catholic Culture is an app. You can download that and get university-like homeschooling right there in the palm of your hand. Spectacular. We have opportunities now because of the freedom of the internet, and may we pray we keep it free, for lay Catholics to absolutely set the world on fire. And as they do that, the hierarchy will be held in check and faithfulness. We promise right here at WQPH Radio 89.3 FM on the other side. Mother Angelica's answers, not promises. Well, I'm moving Jesus, Mary, and Joseph and the donkey a little closer to the manger. I hope you are too with the Daughters of St. Paul.
With
lust, not the top topic on the mainstream talk shows, mainstream anything. And you also got to wonder how we just escaped communism at our doorstep this past election. When a civilization sinks to the pits to allow for tyranny to come knocking, it has everything to do, ladies and gentlemen, with carnal sin, because that's exactly what Our Lady, again, told Sister Lucia at Fatima, that more souls go to hell over carnal sin than anything else. And I often wonder what Mother Angelica would have been saying and would say right now regarding, let's say, immodesty in dress, so exemplified by women wearing the tight spandex, what ordinarily might only be seen in a yoga class, the tight leotards, which are now simply common dress. And who's going to call that out, by the way? The women aren't going to call it out. And the guys, they're not going to call it out because they're enjoying every second of it, right? And you wonder why I'm going after the quality of the sermon on Sunday? But it is killing us as a society, spiritually. Do not ever underestimate the power that a woman has with her physical beauty. That is a mighty power. And for the raging hormones called teenage years and into young and older adulthood, let's not kid ourselves, almost through the lifespan, for guys, they can't handle it, ladies and gentlemen. The mind starts wandering. It becomes locked in an emotional bondage of fantasy. And now you can't concentrate on your work, you don't go on in school, and the next thing, you got an unwanted pregnancy. How many lives have been shattered by that little sequence right there? That's so unfair. I say that prayer often when I see some of the dress that's worn, and I say to the Lord, Father, a 17-year-old cannot handle this. A 17-year-old boy, or a 27-year-old boy, or a 37-year-old boy. Well, man, now, okay, we're programmed differently, visually, as you know, and that gets things going, all right, in the biological realm. And women have the keys to that. And I'm telling you, if the warning of the Garabandal message ever does happen in our lifetime, I have no doubt that women are going to be wearing dresses the next day. I often remember an old girlfriend. I won't know if she was a girlfriend. She was a brief acquaintance that I, let's just say, enjoyed fondly within the boundaries of good fun. Carolyn was her name. She said to me, this is in Ireland, Mr. Kilcoyne, we wear dresses over here. We're not like the American women, quote unquote. Oh my God. And she said it with such pride. Should I have proposed on the spot? She was trying to assert her womanhood and her ladylikeness. Oh, how dare she? We wear dresses over here. Indeed. That's what we got to start wearing, ladies. I'm sorry, because you've got that power. So anyway, I just want to throw that in there, having too much experience with my own lust all through the years, and thank the Lord being in control of it, for the most part, but being a teacher about it to many 17-year-olds and older. And ladies, don't you worry, it does take two to tango, and the guys are not scot-free of their responsible Christian maturity in grace, that they don't have to be looking for these things deliberately in terms of their choice of a girlfriend or potential soulmate for life. They're the ones who are called to be spiritual protectors of you. So they have to be in constant vigilance relative to their mind. Mother finishes up by saying, you might be wondering why God allows us to go through all this agony and indecision, why he would let his children battle with sin and evil and lust in the first place. Wouldn't it be better if we lived in a world that was free of lust? Well, as a practical matter, we don't. Adam and Eve, our original parents, have already taken care of that by desiring to know evil. They made a decision to say to God, I will not serve. One of the punishments for Adam's sin was a weakness for evil, which has been passed down to all men. Facts are facts, and the fact is that we are all weak. So let's look at the world the way it is, not just the way we wish it to be, and see what we can make of it. Because if we do that, we begin to see that overcoming lust, as grim and difficult as it is an opportunity to prove your love for God. It's true, every time you are presented with an occasion of sin, you are also being given an occasion to choose holiness. They are simply flip sides of the same coin. Each event in life is an opportunity to choose God. If you envision the world from that standpoint, you lose some of the oppressive feelings you may have about sin and temptation. The fight against lust can make you holy. Every time you resist sin, you bend your will closer and closer to the will of God. You align yourself with His thinking, His strength, His sensibilities of time and place. You become less afraid of yourself and your weaknesses when you see the power of God in your life and know that He is ready to rescue you. It's not an easy process, this life of sorting out the good from the evil. We sometimes squirm because it seems unfair. We go about our everyday business and then, bam, there's a temptation that's really tough to resist. We fall, pick ourselves up again, and fall again. But these are battles that must be fought and won if we are to be God's children. This is the way it is, and the way it always has been. My only caution for you is this: don't kid yourself. If you are dabbling with lust, you don't pretend it's okay, because it's not. Don't walk into situations that you know mean trouble, because you're going to have a hard time getting out of them. Don't gloss over the hard truth that sin is sin. Adultery is sin. Sexual union before marriage is a sin. Indulging in lust is a sin. Homosexual activity is a sin. Watching adult movies is a sin. Reading sex magazines is a sin. Sin is not love. Sin is disobedience and pride. Sin is turning away from God, and the moment you come to terms with the truth that does not change, you have rounded the corner and are headed back into the arms of God again. You can overcome your temptations. God will help you. Hallelujah. And don't forget that book by Mary Beth Bonacci, Real Love. I've said it could be the compendium to the Catechism of the Catholic Church. In the Catechism, we often simply use an umbrella term for all kinds of sexual perversion called fornication. But she goes into the weeds, and we need to know what those weeds are and how to stay clear of them. So grab that book for sure. And another great book to grab is Father John Hardin's Catholic Catechism. He has a chapter on grace that's just out of this world, no pun intended, but he uses the age-old expression in Catholic sacramental theology called building oneself up in grace by going to confession often. Don't be doing it once a year or twice a year, Christmas and Easter. Sorry. That's a good requirement for those living in sanctifying grace just about all the time. But most of us are not there. And St. John Paul II always recommended once a month, but I would go to Father Chad Ripperger if you really want to grow in the spiritual life and stay ahead of the game, every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, even every week, but you don't want to get over scrupulous either. But we need to avail ourselves of the wonderful keys to the kingdom, which is forgiveness and starting anew and turning the page. And it's called confession, especially this Christmas season. Indeed, do you hear what I hear? God bless. Let your light shine. That is what it's all about here at WQPH Radio 89.3 FM. But we need to hear your story. You want your voice to be His voice. That is making the faith known to others. Please, my number is 877-625-3727. Tim Kilcoyne, TalkCatholic.com. St. Mother Teresa told us, your ministry is your work right where you are. Grab on to this microphone. God bless.